Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Strong Inside and Out, the place where you can always get that great nugget to help you be your best, being strong on the inside and out. And this week, I am excited to be back talking to you about control. I have to admit, I've been called a control freak in the past, and I definitely know that I am a recovering perfectionist. And I'm excited to talk about this because this was something that I truly had to work on, both as a mom, well, not both, had to work on it as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as a sister, as a daughter, as a teacher, as a leader. It was showing up in all aspects of my life because I'm an authentic person, and what you see is what you get. I'm not somebody who's going to give you a false persona, and it was just who I was. So it's something definitely to talk about this week as we continue on our path of being our best. So let's definitely get started. It's January and we're about to have a big freeze here in Houston, have some snow, I believe. They're predicting 5 inches, which we had some snow in 2021, not very much. I remember it was really cold. But the last time that we had significant anything was in 2019, and that one was bad. We lost power for days. I was out for 22 hours. My daughter was out for 26, but my one of my closest friends was out for 4 days. It was crazy insane, and it was all due to the ice and the snow and the power grid and how much power we were using. When you live in a state that doesn't typically get that cold of weather, our systems just can't handle it. So I'm preparing. My pipes are wrapped, just thinking about all of the things I need to finalize before the big blast comes in. But ironically, I'm recording this on Saturday, January 18, and tomorrow is the Houston Marathon. I'm not running this year. I do feel sad about that. I'm not running because of my injuries, and they're starting to feel better, and I'm getting back on track, and I'll be running in 2026. But right now, or at least let's hope so. But right now, I'm not in a place to be able to do that. And it really made me sad. And then I saw the forecast, and it's going to be in the 30s in the morning and the highs at like 43 tomorrow. Um, and there's going to be wind that's like 15 to 25 miles per hour. So if this were a year to not be doing it, I think, yeah, I'm not sad about it. So having said that, good luck to all the runners out there. If you're listening to my podcast, actually, you'll hear this episode after the run is done. So hopefully you made it, you did your thing, you made yourself proud. There's nothing like crossing that finish line. I've done it 14 times now, maybe 15. I can't remember. I've lost count. But every year, the experience of crossing that line is something that brings tears to my eyes. It just truly does. You push yourself to your limits, and you do something that at some point along that path, you're going to wonder, can I really do this? Unless you're an elite runner, of course, I'm not, and I'm not fast. I never claimed to be. Um, but it is an amazing experience, and my heart will be with you. And yeah, so good luck to everybody. And even though you'll hear this afterwards, I hope you had an amazing experience. So this week, I wanted to talk to you about something that's really been on my mind lately. Again, I see it a lot coming up in different social media groups. I've heard it a lot in actual conversations I've been having with people. And it kind of got sparked by an incident that happened to my daughter this week. She is an important person on the campus that she works. She's a specialist or a teacher, an interventionist, and she had been asked to step up and help out with taking care of a situation that needed to be taken care of. And the situation really is something that is very doable, but the way it was presented and the way it was maybe planned out was a little bit stressful. And so I thought this really probably was a perfect conversation to have because for many of us, we're in a place right now, it's January, and a lot is going on. We just had a new year, and research says that within the first couple of weeks of January, people who had these big goals, resolutions, so to speak, they let them go by the end of that second-ish week. And I've heard recently, January 16 is kind of that day, right? That we just say, okay, this isn't worth it. I'm not going to be able to make this happen. Um, in addition to that, it's time where I know for some of the clients that I work with, they're in their reviews right now with their employees. So whether you're in a leadership position or you're an employee of somebody, you're getting your reviews done in many aspects. And it makes you start to step back and reflect on how did I do this year? What were my strengths? And where do I want to go in the upcoming year? Raises are typically given out. And we know that right now the economy is struggling. Have you seen the price of eggs lately? My goodness, I just saw it on the news the day after I was doing my grocery shopping online, and I was shocked. I haven't seen eggs that high in a while. So clearly something going on with chickens or eggs or something, but it's affecting the economy. And then I also know, of course, we're getting ready for the inauguration. So again, I'm reporting on the 18th. That's happening on the 20th, and it could feel a little bit unstable for people, whether you voted for this president or for the other candidate, it doesn't really matter. I think nonetheless, we still feel like there's going to be some change coming upon. I also work with teachers, and I work with schools and leaders in schools, and I work in a school myself now. And this is the time of year where it starts to become there becomes a little more pressure for both the leader and the teachers and the parents and the students, I guess I could add, because you're rounding out the first half of the year, gearing up for that second half where a lot of things come and they come fast. And one of the biggest lessons I had to learn as a new principal was January, February, it just moves. And not only are you moving through the remainder of the current school year, but you start putting your foot into the next school year. You start talking about teacher evaluations, and you start talking about contracts for the next school year, and you start talking about how are we going to do summer school, and then what are we going to do about the start of school? What does next year's calendar look like? And all of the things that have to get done while you're still working very hard on the things that are currently happening. And then, of course, if you're not somebody who is employed, if you're somebody out there who you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad, or maybe you're in between jobs right now, all of these pressures still come at you as well, right? So your kids are feeling it, or your spouse or partner may be feeling it, or you might be feeling it within your own household. Nonetheless, we're all feeling some pressure right now. And when we start to feel pressure, I know for myself, I tended for many years to start to feel like if life was getting out of control, I needed more control. And I was bad. Now, I'm going to give you a little history about how I got there, because I bet when I just said that phrase, I was bad, when my life was out of control, I felt like I needed control. Some of you are sitting there shaking your head because this is typical. And my history, I grew up in a home that I'm going to use the word messy. It was messy. I love my dad. We have a great relationship. I love my sister, my brother. My brother and I are rebuilding our relationship. My sister and I are getting closer. My grandparents have passed on. I loved my grandparents, my aunt, my uncle, all the people. But unfortunately, when I was a child, my home was messy. My parents were young when I was born. They were still in high school. Then they couldn't go on to pursue all their goals and dreams, right? Back in the 70s, that was just not the way things happened. My mom finished high school and graduated, but my dad dropped out to work, and he then got his GED, and then he eventually went into the military. But when you have all these pressures on you as a parent and a husband, because back then you got married if you had a child, it was just unheard of if you didn't. And so they were growing up while I was growing up. And we moved from our small town in Iowa to Colorado so my dad could go into the military without any family. And then he left the military, and we went back to our small town in Iowa. And then we spent a lot of time with grandparents. My grandma lived next door to us, and then my other grandparents. I spent a lot of time with them. My dad worked in the day, my mom worked in the night. So we didn't always have a parent. We had a parent home most of the time, but when we didn't, we were with our grandparents. And then my parents ended up getting divorced, and it was a rocky road for a couple of years. A lot of things that I knew about that I wish I hadn't, but that was just my road, that was my path. And by the time I started high school, they were divorced. And then my mom kind of went off the deep end, and she already had some other mental health kinds of things going on. But instead of taking prescribed medications, she started, medicating herself. It was a lot, y'all. And then I ended up falling right into those same patterns. I met my ex-husband in high school, and I just wanted somebody to love me. Not that my family didn't love me, but I felt like if he loved me, if my ex-husband loved me, then I was going to be loved forever. And I ended up getting pregnant. My daughter is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I was out of high school. It was my first year in college, but he was still in high school when we got pregnant. And it limits your opportunities, especially now where, it was 1990 and things still were starting to transition. You can hear me tell you my life was messy. And I remember as a kid thinking, and I took it all to heart, I wanted to change the world one day. I wanted to have an impact on children. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. And I really thought about kids like me, kids that had to endure stuff like this. I survived, and I'm not asking for sympathy or anything like that, but it's my story. I'm proud to say that on the other side of it, I was able to still accomplish all the things that I had in life. But for a while, it was rough. And I got to a place where I felt like when I was out of control, when life was out of control, I needed to control. And when I got married and I was in college, my first year, we had our daughter. It was a year later that we actually got married. So she was just about to turn 1. And my ex-husband, he chose to not pursue college and work. Um, it wasn't the same situation as my parents. It was a choice of his, but that's what he chose. I chose to get my degree finished, and then we made the choice to leave our hometown and transition here to Houston. I've shared that story before. And life was hard. It was hard. We were here, we were 1,000 miles away from home. We didn't have visitors often. We had visitors, but not often. And, we had to learn how to figure it out. We had to learn how to pay the bills. We had to learn how to live in a city. We had to learn how to drive on the freeway. We had to learn how to be parents of an elementary school child. She was starting kindergarten when we got here. And she wasn't old enough to stay by herself. So if we wanted to ever go out with friends or have a night out, as a date night, we had to rely on other people and find those people that we could trust. And that could be a hard situation. And I always remembered two things about growing up is that when life was out of control, I needed to have control. And my second thing is, if I am perfect, then everyone will be happy with me and I won't be part of contributing to anybody's problem. So here I was, this perfectionist who needed control. And I tried to control everything. I tried to control, of course, myself, my home, my finances, my ex-husband, our daughter, her life, everything. Even down to, y'all, it got to a place where I needed, here's the perfectionist in me, to be the host of all of the fun parties. I needed the validation that everybody wanted to come to my home and enjoy my food and my drinks. And it was a recipe for disaster. And I had to make changes or I was not going to be able to keep going. Not that I was thinking about ending my life. It wasn't anything like that. But I was getting to a place where I was not enjoying life at all. Not at all. And unfortunately, and take note for all of you out there, the moment I realized I needed to make the change was when my ex-husband said he no longer wanted to be with me and he had been doing all of the things he was doing and he wanted a divorce. And although my contribution to it, I didn't do anything necessarily wrong, meaning, step out on him or anything like that. But I think I contributed by being such a high achiever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but part of that also included the perfectionism and the need for control. Now, I'm going to pause for a minute there. And you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, she's just unloading on us. I'm not, because I'm in a fantastic place right now. It took me a minute. I had to go through the hurdle of adjusting to the divorce, but I also got to build a life I wanted to live. And that was probably the biggest blessing of having gone through my divorce. And the first two things that I did is I let go of the perfectionism and stayed focused on progress, striving for excellence. I always wanted to do my best, but I didn't need to be perfect because I realized perfect, number one, is exhausting. And number two, there is no perfect. It doesn't exist. And then I didn't need to control everything. What I needed to learn how to do is to be able to breathe when I was feeling out of control and focus on only the things that I could actually respond to, only the things that I could change. If life was out of control and I didn't want that happening, I couldn't control it, but I could change it. And I had to focus on those changes. So as I said, I pause here because I know that there are many of you listening to this that have felt this way before. And maybe you're currently in that situation right now, especially as women, I think. And you know what? Let me retract that. I think, especially as high achievers, men or women, we start to feel like we've done things so well for so long and it starts to spiral in a different direction. Your inkling is to fix it, to make it perfect, to make it better, and to have that control. I was listening to, of course, podcasts. I'm an avid podcast listener as well. And I was listening to a few this week. And this is where the theme kind of came upon as well. Why? Why do we feel that need to have the control? I just shared my story. You heard me. Mess, chaos. I had a lot of trust issues. I didn't know what to expect. And again, leading up to our separation and divorce, my ex-husband was starting to become out of control. And so, of course, I was pulling that control back in. But again, too, I think a lot of it is insecurity. I know I was a perfectionist because I was too worried that if I wasn't perfect, people were not going to love me. And that led to me needing to control every situation so that I could look perfect, so I could be the best. And it was like a cycle that just kept breeding this and breeding this. I was hearing another podcast this week where someone who is very highly respected and well known was speaking. It's a male. He was speaking about just the whole fact of what's happening with his kids, and they're starting to graduate high school and go off to college or go off and live their lives. And I even think about back when my daughter was making that transition as well. And it reminded me that I was trying harder to control her also. She left, she went 4 hours away to college her first year. She ended up coming home, not because of me, but because of another situation. But once she got home, I needed control. I needed her home at a certain time. I needed her following my rules. I needed her cleaning her room. I needed all of these things about her to be the way I wanted them to be after she had been away for 6 months living life like she wanted to live. And it didn't last long. She stayed with us another semester and then she left again, went to another university for a year, but ended up not staying there and pursuing that and came home. And that's right when the divorce was happening. So there were a lot of factors, but it also became, again, a time where now she's back. She wanted to have fun with her friends and party and live like she was living on her own in my home. And I was paying for everything and I was buying the groceries and I was, having to clean up after the parties and all of the things. And we just kept a constant clashing that when we actually left our home, we sold it and moved back to Iowa for a couple of years. We did not live together. And we did not live together after that on purpose. And we have a great relationship. She's my best friend. I'm her best friend besides her husband, I'm sure. But we're very, very close. We're really great now. But we did have to go through that. And she had to learn her boundaries as an adult child living in my home. And I had to learn my boundaries as a mom of an adult child living in my home and wanting to, have their own life. There's a lot, y'all. We go through a lot. And it's not just moms, it's dads too. And it breeds into this. So again, I think this is such a timely topic because I know this is not the way we want to feel. If you were anything like I was exhausted and I wasn't happy. There was no part of it that I was happy. We would have the parties. Everybody would have so much fun. They would leave. I would be doing all the cleaning. I would be making sure we were back on track to go back to work next Monday, all of the things. And then I would pull that resentment kind of thing out, and I know I'm not alone. So how do we overcome this? Because that's what you really want to hear, right? Yes, we feel it. It's there. It's real. How do we overcome? The first thing, as I mentioned, I had to stop playing the perfectionism and playing the control card. And I had to give myself permission to not be perfect. That was huge. That was huge for me. And it took a minute. Even when I started changing my mindset and reminding myself of these things, I still had to convince myself, right? I still had to start living life differently based on what I was telling myself. It took a little bit. And I can find myself when I start to get stressed and overwhelmed. I do revert back to that a little bit. So I think it's and I do a lot of work with limiting beliefs as well. I think it's one of those limiting beliefs that can really pop back up. They don't necessarily always go away. You overcome them, but they're lingering, just like I liken it to like somebody who's an addict, right? You can stop, you keep taking the steps so that you don't go back to using, but it's always going to be there. It never goes away. My dad, he's a recovering alcoholic. He's been sober for, oh gosh, I'm 53, so probably I think I was in fourth or fifth grade. So I would say close to 43, 45 years. And he still can't, I mean, he could be around it. He's fine. But if he were to start drinking again, we don't know what could happen. Could he revert back to his ways from way back in the day? We just don't know. So that's why, it's so important that alcoholics or drug users, once they get clean, they can't go back. It comes full circle. But then, then once you start control, there I go again. There, see, I made the slip even. Once you start to overcome that perfectionism, then staying focused on what you can control, what you can change about a situation. So I actually got to a place where I started journaling and I would talk about, and it's funny, I just said about, someone who is addicted, that serenity prayer. I remember it because my dad would, utilize it a lot. But that's another piece where knowing what things you can't control in life and what things you can make changes around and staying focused on that. Now, I think it's interesting with social media and to play and all of the things. I was just on social media this morning and I was talking to my daughter and I was saying how you see everybody's best, right? They're not giving you their worst days. You're not going to post that on social media. You're going to post your best days on social media, or at least most people do. And it's an easy time that you want to compare and you get into that trap of why isn't my life like that? But here's the reality. Nobody's life is going to be happy every single day, and nobody's life is going to be awful every single day. And if it is to those extremes, not necessarily happy, but if it is awful every single day, that's when you seek out some help, right? I started journaling and just wrote down what was happening in my world that day. And then how did I feel about it? And then if I wasn't feeling positive about it, what changes did I want to make and how was I going to make those changes? And I'll leave you with this. I'm still not at a place where I'm 100%, but I am like a bazillion% better than I was. And I work again, I mentioned in a school again, and I was still in a place where I'm about 2.5 months in, actually about 2 months in with the holiday breaks and things. And I'm getting to meet with each of the students individually, and it's taking a moment. And I was sitting down with a couple of students yesterday on Friday and telling them about me and how I got to this place and what I'm going to do to support them. And then they get to tell me about them. And one little girl says, they're not little, they're middle school, but she says, wow, you've had an amazing life. And I look back on my life thinking, yeah, I've done some really great things and I'm really proud of the things that I've done, but I don't know if I'd call it amazing. But from her perspective, it is amazing. And it reinforced to me that I am doing okay and that I don't need to have control and I don't need to be perfect, but continue to strive for excellence in everything that I do. Continue to say yes to me when I want to try something new, even if I'm fearful that I might fail. And live by my core values, live authentic, as you heard me say at the start of this week's episode. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I got for you this week. I took I need control and changed it around to let me live a happy life. Let me live authentically and let me strive for excellence in all that I do. I hope this helped a little bit, my rambling sometimes, but I think it was a pretty good message this week. So reach out, of course, if you have any feedback. I'd love to hear from you. Share this with a friend if you think one of your friends might need to hear this message. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss out on one of the episodes. We can only grow if we have bigger audiences and get that word out. And I love doing this podcast, even though it seems random a little bit. I do love the fact that I can share my knowledge and wisdom and experiences from over the years to help somebody out there like me who just wants to be strong on the inside and out. I'll see you next week, right back here. Have a great one.